Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
The alley that stretched too far. I don't tell this story often. In fact, I don't tell it to anyone other than a few close friends, like very, very close. I really hope they don't have to deal with it. Not because it's dramatic or strange, it's because it's not. Not in any obvious way. And that's exactly what bothers me. The way something can feel wrong enough that your brain keeps trying to explain it away, justify it, dismiss it, while some part of you whispers, "No, you shouldn't forget this." It happened in March many years ago. I was 13, living in the suburbs of Liverpool. It was the time of year when winter had not yet fully retreated, and spring was just beginning to peek through the leafless trees. The sky was often gray, with low clouds that covered the entire neighborhood in a thick ash-colored blanket. The dim light seemed unable to penetrate the damp mist and chill that lingered in the air. A gentle, persistent drizzle had lasted from early morning to late afternoon, leaving the cobblestones slippery and glistening with water. That afternoon, a similar rain fell and dissipated quickly, leaving puddles reflecting the gloomy sky. The wind blew in gusts, not so much as to be violent, but enough to stir the dead leaves of the season, weaving through the narrow alleys, emitting a soft hissing sound like a strange whisper. I remember poking at 2 yellow leaves stuck in the drain, watching them bounce up and drift away with the water. It was a long time ago, but you see, I remember it clearly and there was no reason to doubt it. I walked home from school as usual, nothing unusual. Same sneakers, same hoodie, same bag of cheap food from the co-op. Everything was the same. It was about 4:30 when I turned into the back alley behind the store, the one I'd known since I could crawl.
It wasn't really an alley. It was just a narrow pedestrian path that ran between 2 rows of brick houses, connecting the main street with the residential areas behind. It was always a little gloomy. Concrete slabs underfoot, moss growing between the cracks, and 6 abandoned concrete pillars. I'd counted them as I passed them, ever since I was a kid, partly out of habit, partly out of boredom. Past the 6th pillar, and you were almost home. That day, though, something was off. It wasn't until later that I realized it. The sky had turned a strange gray, too uniform, as if someone had covered everything with a thick layer of dust. There was no traffic behind me, no birdsong, no blaring calls from the co-op delivery bay down the street. Just a dead silence. I was just a little hesitant at the entrance to the alley. Nothing was wrong, obviously, but it didn't feel right. Still, I kept going. It was cold, my hands were full, and I told myself I was being stupid. The first thing I noticed were the concrete pillars.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I stopped. Now listen. I'm not good at numbers, nor do I have a phenomenal memory. I couldn't tell you how many windows there are in the front of my house, or how many steps lead up to the library. But this? I know this. There were always 6 lampposts in that alley. I used to pretend they were guards when I was a kid, standing guard on the street. I even talked to them, silly, I know. But I was a kid then. Who hasn't done that shit, right? I'm not proud of it, I'm just saying it's true. And now there are more. 9, 10, 11, 12. If there were only 7 or 8, I could have fooled myself into misremembering or miscounting at some point. But no, there were 12. 12 concrete posts. It was like the alley had doubled. I stood there, right in the middle of that alley, staring at the 12th pillar in the distance. The street continued. Longer than it should have. It didn't curve. It didn't branch. It just stretched forward, perfectly straight, lined with old brick walls and glassless windows, and those tall, rusty lamps rising one after another into the thick gray air. I listened. Nothing. Not even the distant hum of a plane overhead. The wind was moving, but there was no sound. It just passed me like something sliding out of a room unnoticed. I should have turned back. But I didn't. That's what I regret most, not the fact that it happened, but the fact that I kept walking. Shaking, scared, but still. The alley seemed steeper than I remembered. Not uphill, exactly. It was like it was tilting very slightly to the left, in a way that your eyes don't notice but your legs do, because my body was swaying to one side and it was hard to walk straight on the line like normal. And the further I walked, the darker the sky became, even though there were no clouds. Just a darker gray, like the air was thickening. The walls were higher, or maybe closer. Or maybe it was because my vision was tilting with my body. The windows were gone. The bricks seemed alien. Too uniform. Like a film set made to look like a row of council houses. But there was no depth behind them. No life. And then the silence was broken. Not with a bang. Not with a scream. Just a low, vibrating hum from somewhere deep in the alley. It wasn't coming from behind or in front. It was coming from inside the walls or down the passage. Like something big, mechanical, and breathing. I stopped. My chest tightened. I looked around and realized something I still can't explain. I couldn't remember how far I'd walked. It felt like only a few minutes. Or an hour. I had no reference point. No turning point. The 6th lamppost was nowhere to be seen behind me. The 12th was still ahead. I turned around. And just like that, it was over. There was the 6th lamppost. The 5th. The familiar cracked brick. The smell of wet concrete and trash from the left wall. The same gutter I'd almost slipped in countless times. Everything fell into place. I walked quickly back home, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't name. When I walked through the door, my mother was surprised to see me. "You're home early," she said. "Aren't you going out?" I looked at my watch. 5:04 p.m. It was earlier than usual. Although I felt like I had been walking for much longer. Although time inside that alley had lost all shape and texture. I tried to laugh it off. Told her that the weather was making me feel strange. She nodded, distracted by the kettle. I didn't mention it again. The next day, I went back with 2 friends. I should add that I usually went with everyone, but that day they had something to do. I forgot what exactly. You might ask why I had to do that. Why? Maybe because I was a child. I didn't want to admit I was wrong. But at the same time, I wanted to believe that I had imagined it. There were 6 lampposts. Just 6. The walls were old and ordinary. I could even see the end of the street without entering the alley. And in fact, I didn't actually enter. After that, I never went through that alley again. I still live nearby. Still shop at the same co-op. But now I always take the long way home. Via the main road, even when it rains. Even when I'm late. Because part of me believes that if I walk into that alley again on the wrong day, I might not get out again.
2. Endless floor. I've been living in Berlin for almost 5 years now. Same flat, same gray apartment block. Tucked away in one of the quiet back streets of Lichtenberg, where nothing ever happens. It's a holdover from the DDR era. Square, cheap, a little rough around the edges. You know the kind. Straight balconies, dusty green staircases, thick concrete walls. My flat is on the 8th floor. Not much of a view, unless you count the satellite antennas and pigeons. But this is my home, or at least what I can afford now. Fuck, it was raining the night it happened. A cold, damp, bone-chilling drizzle. Damn this awful weather. I just gotten off work late, and hadn't eaten all day, so I ordered Lieferando on the subway home. Thai food, nothing exciting. Just habit. The bill was €12.48 with a free Coke. I would have picked up my food when I got home, but due to the weather or some other shit, the delivery was delayed by almost an hour, and I decided to go home first. And I still regret that decision. Damn. At 9:01 p.m., I took the elevator down to get my groceries from the lobby. Our area is pretty old, and there's no room delivery service. Even if there was, I probably wouldn't use it. Don't ask me why, I'm poor, okay? I remember the exact time, because I glanced at my phone as I walked in, annoyed that I forgot my umbrella again. I pressed the button for the ground floor and leaned against the wall. The elevator jerked as usual, and then it opened. I cursed under my breath, but didn't say it out loud. Well, that's not unusual. The elevator stopped. Maybe someone wanted to go down too. But when the doors opened, there was no one there. I was left staring down the long hallway in shock, horrified, painted a pale blue-green, the kind of color that looked like it had been brighter decades ago. The walls were chipped, blistered in places, as if moisture had been trapped underneath. The overhead lights flickered slightly, not too much, but noticeable. I knew I should close the door and continue down. After all, I had never been to any floors other than the 8th, my own, so it wasn't hard to understand why it felt different or unfamiliar. Just why did I step outside? I didn't know. I really didn't know. Why? Out of habit? Or was I mistaken? But I knew I couldn't go down to the ground floor yet, and yet I went out. I've asked myself all sorts of reasons since then. This was scarier to me than anything I'm about to tell. The feeling of being driven by some force, of not being able to control myself, made me panic to the core. Getting back to the point, I didn't think much of it at the time. Honestly, everything was normal, just something different. Subtly, like the very air itself had changed density. I turned back to the elevator and was about to press the button again, but it was gone. I froze. Where the elevator had opened, there was now only a blank wall. Same paint, same gentle peeling. Seamless, as if the elevator door had never been there. I took a step back. Then another. Nothing. No seams. No borders. Just a smooth, architecturally incongruous wall. I turned around. The hallway stretched onward, strangely long. Too long for the building. No signs. No room numbers. No exit signs. There were only 3 bare bulbs in a row, all humming softly, and the hoarse echo of my breathing. I tried the phone. Still had signal. Still showed 903. I fumbled a bit, but eventually walked. The hallway wasn't completely silent. There was a faint hum coming from the walls, like the sound old refrigerators make when they're about to break down, but deeper, almost like a whisper under the floor, and a normal hum. I don't know how to describe it, but it sounded like someone was cooking, with clinking and laughter, and damn, the smell. It smelled so good, the familiar smell of home-cooked meals, that I started to think I was just paranoid. I walked for a long time, so long that I started to doubt myself. I mean, maybe not really that long, but normally I would have run into a wall. The decor might have changed, but the structure of the building didn't. I was sure it was larger than I remembered. I started staring at the doors on the wall. None of them had numbers. The design was strange, too. I didn't know if I'd seen them before. The other strange thing was that I didn't feel as scared as I should have. I even tried the first door. It was locked. The second door was locked. The third door creaked slightly when I touched it, but it didn't open. I kept going. I don't know how long. The hallway just kept going. At some point, I started to get that feeling. You know, when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. Disoriented, like your brain is a second behind your body. I turned a corner and stopped. Now I was starting to panic. The fear had finally caught up with me. The same lights. The same 3 doors. The same faint stains on the floor tiles that looked like shoe prints. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a circular building. This wasn't where I lived. I knew every inch of this place. I'd walked up the stairs hundreds of times. I've lived here for years. No loop, but I've been here. Walking forever and never finding the elevator. No, it's clearly gone now. I opened my camera and took a picture of the hallway, hoping to prove I wasn't crazy. It looked okay. But when I took another shot, my screen froze for a second, then crashed. A purple line ran down the middle, and the shutter sound didn't sound right. Slower. Warped. I put my phone away. My chest started to tighten. I wasn't desperate, not yet, but I could feel the edges of it creeping in, my legs shaking, a dry mouth, hyper-awareness of my own body. I started talking to myself out loud. Okay, you're in the building. Just find the stairs. There are stairs on every floor. It helped a little. Gave me something to do. I started checking every door for signs of stairs. Nothing. After the third round of the hallway, I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. One of the lights at the end of the hallway was blinking faster, almost like a strobe light. I walked toward it. Next to it, barely visible, was a thin metal door with no handle, just a push bar. I pressed it. It opened onto a narrow staircase, unlit as it should have been. Finally, the stairs curved downward, too tight, too narrow. The walls were bare concrete, damp in places, smelled like mold and old iron. I started down. The stairs had no landings, no signs, no floor numbers, just a spiraling slope that felt like it was taking too long. But finally, after about 15 minutes, I emerged through another heavy metal door, and I was in the lobby. Just like that, just like that. The delivery guy was standing there, scrolling through his phone. as if nothing had happened. He looked up, startled. "Ah, there you are. That was fast." "Fast?" I asked, still panting. "Yeah," he said. "I just got here a few minutes ago. Usually I have to wait like 15 minutes. I glanced at my watch. 9:46. I checked my phone log, but something was wrong. Apparently the app said your delivery was almost an hour ago, and now it was 9:41. And he hadn't called me, which was odd, so I had nothing to verify. But I had clearly gotten into the elevator at 9:01. I'd been gone for 45 minutes. But to him, I'd arrived immediately. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my food and went back upstairs. I didn't dare use the elevator again that night, though I was sure it wasn't the same staircase I'd taken down and the one I'd taken up. The next morning I checked every floor. All of them, including the 9th and 10th floors above. Nothing unusual. Just a short hallway with 4 apartments and a stairwell. The paint was chipped, sure, but otherwise normal. Familiar. But none of the doors I'd seen the night before were there. No winding hallway. No brass knobs. No buzzing. A week later, I told my neighbor about it, half joking. He laughed, clearly in disbelief. Man, I knew what that smile meant, and I wanted to punch him, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want people to look at me like I was on drugs. I still take the elevator now. Come on 8 floors at a time, at least 16 floors a day, and double or triple that if I have work. I refuse. Sometimes, though, I wonder if I hadn't found the stairs that night. Where would I be?
3. The woods wouldn't let me out. I didn't mean to tell this story. It's strange and inexplicable, at least to me. The thing is, there was a small patch of forest behind the language school where I used to work in Bavaria. Not a forest, really. It was a green belt, a handful of narrow paths between farmland and the edge of a quiet village. Nothing dramatic, nothing wild. The kind of place where dog walkers and kids on bikes would carve out the same muddy tracks day after day. Me too. After hours of sitting, I used to walk through it, almost every afternoon, just to stretch my body and clear my mind before I got on the bus home. It was a habit. From the back gate of the school, you could step onto the path, walk straight for about 10 minutes, and end up on the other side of the village, near a bus stop and a bakery that smelled of warm bread and slightly sour yeast. I love that feeling, especially on a chilly day like that one. Of course, the bakery had nothing to do with this. I just wanted to prove that I was completely sane, at least as I sat typing this. It was late February, early spring. The air was still cold enough that your breath would turn white if you stood still. The kind of cold that made you feel clean. The kind that made you think better. I finished class just after 4, packed up, and decided to go for my usual walk. I remember checking the time on my phone, lingering a few minutes until it was exactly 4:30. It was a weird habit, but I like to do things on a round hour, the kind of good hour that makes everything go smoothly. The sky was pale blue, and a few streaks of cloud were catching the late afternoon sun. Everything was normal. Normal in a good way. I walked into the woods. At some point, maybe 2 minutes later, the school disappeared behind you. It was just you and the trees and the thin dirt road. I always liked that moment, that little silence. But this time, the silence felt heavier. Not exactly silent. I could hear birds chirping somewhere and my shoes clicking on the road. The sound of breathing and the cool moisture in my lungs. But there was no wind and nothing moved in the branches. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. I kept going. The road had a few forks, but I knew them well. A left took you past the orchard fence, a right toward the creek, straight to the bus stop. I kept going. At least I thought I did. After a while, I realized that I hadn't seen the orchard fence on my left the way I usually did. The road was still there, but it felt less worn somehow. No children's bike tracks, no dog tracks. Just a clean strip of land, winding deeper, lined with thin, similar birch trunks. I slowed down. I wasn't a paranoid person, but there was something in the air that made me uneasy. It was getting cold, but the sky was still bright. There was no reason to be afraid. I kept going. The path branched again, and I kept going, confident that it would lead out as it always did. The trees were thicker now, the trunks closer together. I should have reached the fence in a few minutes, but there was nothing but trees. That's when I began to notice that the birds had gone quiet. Not suddenly, as if they'd flown away in fear. It was just, I realized that I couldn't hear them anymore. There was no rustling in the bushes, no distant calls. Just the sound of my boots, the crunch of the earth, and the soft, steady beat of my own heart. I stopped. I checked my phone. 4:45 p.m. I frowned. 15 minutes had passed. About 5.5 minutes longer than usual, and 3 times as long as it took me to get to the orchard. Sorry if I'm so obsessed with time, but this was making me really uneasy. I turned around. The path behind me looked exactly like the one in front of me. Narrow, wedged between gray trees, leading to other paths. It wasn't completely different, but it definitely wasn't the path I normally took. I tried to follow the path back, but after 5 minutes, I came to a fork in the road that I didn't remember. I tried to visualize it, and nothing was better. The fork was usually well-groomed, since a lot of people like me took it for exercise. This one, well, was overgrown. I took a left, hoping it would cut off and rejoin the main trail. It felt like it would, but it didn't. The sky was darkening now, the deep blue of a cold afternoon. The air smelled of damp leaves and old earth. I kept walking, trying to stay calm. Another fork in the road. I turned right. Nothing. I tried to walk faster, but it felt like the road stretched out beneath me, with no end in sight. I tried to mark the trees with a small rock, drawing a line in the bark. But after a while, I found that I couldn't tell which part was bark, and which part one had carved. That's when the real fear set in. I stopped again, standing there in the cold, trying to listen for something. Cars, voices, the school bell, anything. But there was nothing. I pulled out my phone again. 5:12 p.m. It had been more than 40 minutes since I'd started. My battery was at 18%. I turned on the map, but it showed a strange path, far away from the bus stop, my destination. As I walked in a small circle, the green dot that represented me also rotated, which seemed normal enough, but it didn't help. I didn't want to panic. It was just a small patch of forest. The tallest tree couldn't have been more than 30 feet tall. You could walk the entire area in 15 minutes. There was no way to actually get lost in there. It was impossible, but it was happening. I kept walking, not caring which direction, just moving. The cold seeped into my fingertips, and I could see my breath again as the light faded. Then, up ahead, I saw a light. Not a bright light, just a soft yellow, like a street lamp reflecting off the branches of a tree. I walked toward it, my heart pounding, half afraid it would disappear. But it didn't. I stepped through a gap in the trees and found myself standing right where I had started, the back gate of a school. I stopped, looking around, disoriented. The school was quiet. The sky was a darkening blue, the windows reflecting the last light of day. I turned around, looking at the forest behind me. It looked normal. Thin, small, harmless. I checked my phone. 5:20 p.m. I had been walking for nearly an hour. I didn't know where I had been, or how I had ended up back at the start without ever seeing the road, or the fences, or the village edge. I walked quickly to the bus stop, not looking back. The bus came right on time. I got on, sat by the window, and stared out at the woods as we passed. They looked small from the road, harmless, but I haven't walked through them since. Sometimes, when I'm walking home at night, I think I see that same yellow light between the trees, flickering softly. And sometimes, I think I hear the crunch of footsteps on a dirt path that isn't there. I tell myself it was just getting turned around for a moment. Just a trick of the light. Just a weird, unlucky hour. But deep down, I know that for nearly an hour that day, the woods kept me. And it was only when they decided to let me go that I found the way out. I stopped, looking around, disoriented. The school was quiet, of course. The last class had long since ended. The sky was a deep blue, the windows reflecting the last light of day. I turned, looked at the woods behind me. They looked normal. Flimsy, small, harmless. I checked my phone. 5:20 p.m. I had walked for exactly 50 minutes. I had no idea where I had been, or how I had gotten back to where I had started without seeing the road, or the fence, or the edge of the village. I walked quickly to the bus stop, not looking back. Enough for one day. The bus arrived on time. I got on, sat by the window, and stared out at the woods as we passed. They looked small from the road. Harmless. But I would never walk through that area again, I swear to God. Update. Mom asked me about being late that day, and I told her. Oh, I should have not. Mom was so worried that she even wanted Dad to take me every day to be safe. I felt like she knew something but wasn't going to say it, which scared me. But maybe I was thinking too much. This was just a disorientation attack.
Fourth, the school that flipped. I haven't been back to my old elementary school in almost 20 years. There was simply no reason to go back, and even this time it was by accident. I have no attachment to that school, at least not something I ever planned to do. After 5th grade, my family moved to a new place, and life went on in the usual, relentless way that makes you forget the hallways and dining halls that have been with you for so many years. Yes, although I don't like it, I can even say I hate it, these things are deeply imprinted in my memory. A few months ago, someone organized a reunion. He, she, or they posted many old and new pictures of students who had studied there to reminisce. Apparently, a group of people I barely remembered or even knew were coming. Still, I had those pictures and, let's say, I was bored out of my mind on a free weekend, so I decided to drive to Vermont and see for myself. It was one of the clearest, most beautiful afternoons of the year. The air smelled like pine needles and wood smoke, and the sky was too blue for anything bad to happen. I parked in the small parking lot next to the playground, along a cracked asphalt road with faded yellow lines. The swings still creaked in the wind, the slides still sparkled in the sunlight, though it looked smaller than I remembered. I stood there for a minute, breathing in the cold air, feeling something tighten in my chest that I couldn't name. Then I walked to the main entrance. There were the same red double doors. The same creaking sound when I pulled them open. The same faint smell of pencil shavings, floor polish, and dusty books that seemed to be in every school. But as soon as I stepped inside, I sensed something was off. At first, I couldn't quite place it. Just a slight unease in my head. The front office was on the left, as I remembered. The bulletin board with its paper leaves and paper pumpkins was on the right. But as I walked further down the hall, looking for the classroom where I'd spent so many hours, I froze. The hallway was upside down. I don't mean it was different. I don't mean they'd remodeled it. I mean it was exactly the same beige walls, same cracked tiles, same creaky floorboards near the fountain, but flipped upside down. The classroom that had been on the right was now on the left, at the back. The windows that had let the morning light hit my right shoulder as I sat at my desk were now on the left, catching the same angle of sunlight. It was as if someone had taken the entire building, made a perfect copy, and turned it sideways. I stood there, my heart beating a little faster, trying to convince myself that nothing had happened, that maybe I had remembered wrong, that memories fade over time, and buildings get renovated, doors get moved. But as I walked down the hallway, I began to notice details that I knew I hadn't. The sign outside the classroom still had the faded letters, Mrs. Carver's 3rd class. The same smiling apple sticker in the corner, peeling off just like it had when I was a kid. The same little crack in the ceiling above the door. Everything was the same, just upside down. I stepped inside, half expecting the room to change, for the illusion to vanish. But it didn't. The teacher's desk was still by the window, now on the left. The chalkboard was still across from the door, but it was upside down. The lockers where we usually put our backpacks and coats were now on the left instead of the right. The strangest thing was how normal it looked. I walked to the corner by the door, near the foot of the stairs that led up to the small loft of the library. I stood there, staring at the wall, running my hand along the smooth paint. When I was 8, I slipped during recess, running too fast down the hall, and cracked my front teeth on the floor. I remembered the taste of blood, the stinging pain, the way I pressed my hand against the wall as I tried not to cry. I remember looking down and seeing a tiny smear of blood on the wall, just above the baseboard, near a scuff from a shoe. It was small, but it was mine. I looked at it every day. I even drew it with a pen along the edge, as a way of protecting it and leaving my mark. Stupid, but childish. Still, I was sure I wasn't mistaken. I bent down, squinting, and there it was. A faint, rust-colored stain, exactly where I remembered it. Except now it was on the left side of the hallway, a few feet from where it should have been. I stood up slowly, my hands cold despite the warmth of the room. Someone laughed behind me and I turned, startled, to see a few old classmates walking in, chatting about where they'd moved, who had kids, who still lived nearby. I tried to act normal, greet them, make small talk, but part of me was still looking around, trying to catch the sight of the building being flipped back to its original state. It never did. At one point, I saw Miss Carver, older now, her hair streaked with gray but her smile still the same. Honestly, she was 50% of the reason I hated this school, the other 50% was the terrible cafeteria food. But I felt like she was my savior. I pulled her aside, trying to act casual. Hey, did they, remodel the school at some point? Change the layout? She raised her eyebrows, probably wondering why I asked, then smiled and shook her head. No, honey. It's always been like that. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her about the blood, about the direction of the windows, about the way the light hit my desk in the morning. But I didn't. I just nodded and let her move on to someone else. We took a group photo before leaving, standing in front of the same red double doors. Everyone smiled. I tried to smile too. Then I got in my car and drove home. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've found old photos from elementary school. Photos of me and my classmates standing in the hallway, near the classroom door, near the stairs. In every photo, the composition is the same as it is now. Window on the left, locker on the left, stairs on the left. As if everything had always been like this. But I know it wasn't. I remember the way the sun shone down on my desk from the right, the way I covered my eyes with my right hand while doing math. I remember the blood on the wall, on the right, near the stairs. I remember. And I'm sure. Because if you roll nearly 10 feet down the stairs, the price you pay will definitely be more than just a baby tooth and a little blood. I still don't have an answer. But I do know one thing. That school was messed up. Did it affect me? Not completely, at least not physically. But did it really? And I was the only one who knew it.
Right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.